Hey, it's Paul Blau, time for another 5x5, and recently we have conducted a disaster recovery conference for our clients, and if you weren't able to come to that, let me give you kind of the 5-minute overview of some of the things that we talked about. Now, disasters are a reality. It's not a question of if you're going to have a disaster, it's really a question of when you're going to have a disaster. And what do I mean by that? Well, it can be anything from, hey, my computer just froze up and I can't get it back up and running, or my hard drive crashed, to, hey, my computer caught on fire, or hey, my building caught on fire. So anything in between all of that, that's a disaster. And it has varying impacts on your business. And so first of all, what we kind of recommend people doing is what's known as a risk assessment. And that's where you kind of just look around and you ask yourself, how likely is it that we have an earthquake? How likely is it that we have a hurricane? How likely is it that we have a tornado, a fire, a hard drive crash? And so we try to get as much of the list flushed out as we can. This isn't meant to be totally comprehensive. It's meant to be an intellectual exercise to try to get you thinking about the things that could go wrong. And then you evaluate them based on 2 criteria. Usually on a 1 to 5 scale, how likely is this to happen? And on a 1 to 5 scale, what kind of an impact would it have on my business, with 5 being the most severe and 1 being very little. And you can even rate it as a 0, that it wouldn't have any impact whatsoever. And so once you have that risk profile, a risk assessment done, we do typically a risk management plan, or a risk mitigation plan, sometimes it's called, where what we're going to do then is we're going to take those larger risks, we're going to prioritize, because you can't do everything. We don't have unlimited budgets to be able to spend on fixing everything. So we prioritize the highest risk, highest impact items, and then we mitigate those as much as possible. So I'm going to spend some money to create a backup system, or I'm going to have my data is kept off-site. Maybe I'm going to have a hot site. Maybe I'm going to partner with a company like Blautech, and I'm going to call them in the event of a disaster. You're going to have some type of a mitigation plan in place. That could involve software, it can involve new systems, it can involve even just a written plan. So then after you've done the mitigation plan, then what we do is we do a business impact analysis. And it's a little bit of a deeper dive where you're actually going to talk with people within your company, and you're going to ask them, hey, what would be the impact if I wasn't able to give you the computer system, or if you couldn't come in the next day? And the business impact analysis is really more talking to people, where up to this point we've been talking about technology. Now we're talking about people and how they use it, and you're going to discover that there is some other issues and some things that you weren't even aware of. Sometimes people are more dependent on technology, or more dependent on a facility or a resource than what you even knew. Then, and only then, after we've gathered up all of that information, we'll craft a disaster recovery plan. And that plan can be pretty comprehensive. It could be, I've seen them as large as 100 pages, and it can be as simple as just a few pages. So you need to have your business plan in writing, and the adage there that we really want to focus in on is that we've got to have everything written down. If you fail to plan, you're planning to fail. And that's really, really important for you to consider. This is why we've got to write it down. It cannot be simply set there like, oh, I'm just going to remember it, or I'll figure it out as we go, because this is a crisis situation. Flight or fight reflexes have kicked in, where we may actually, if it's say like a flood disaster or some type of a really bad storm, there may be human life loss that you're dealing with, that tragedy, or you may have situations where employees or houses have been destroyed or damaged, and you're worried about your people. And so if you have a written plan, it helps to make sure that you don't forget something. And that written plan should include things like, how do I get a hold of my people in the event of a disaster? What are their personal cell phones? And who are the carriers that they use for those cell phones? So if I need to send them a text message, I can do that. Tell them that we're not located here any longer. We're going to be located at this emergency response center. So you're thinking through all of those pieces in that plan. And then you're really asking yourself, okay, if this happens, then what are we going to do? And then documenting that out. And again, as you go through that process, you're going to discover that there are things that you didn't think about in the risk assessment or the risk mitigation level or the business impact level. You're going to think about some other things as the plan's developing, and it's okay. The last thing I'll tell you though is that these plans have to be updated on at least an annual basis, because things change in your business. Your software that you use, your facilities and your resources, even your employees. And if you're not careful, you'll have a brilliant, wonderful plan that isn't applicable any longer because it calls for people that aren't even there to head up particular efforts in the disaster recovery. This is critical because you are going to have a disaster. And most businesses, by far way above the median line of 50%, most businesses that do not plan for disaster recovery and experience it are going to fail, and I mean fail in the sense that they're not going to be in business any longer. One statistic says that if you're without capabilities to use your systems and your business for 5 days, the likelihood of a small business being able to ever come back into existence is only about 30%. So it's a 70% failure rate. You're 70% likely to be out of business if you don't have a plan in place that allows you to get back at work. So simply saying, take the time. I know you don't have a lot of time, but take the time to put something down in writing. Get some templates. There are plenty of templates out there. We can provide those with you if you don't have access yourself to them. And get it down in writing so that you know what to do, not if, but when the disaster happens.